meeting to order. This is the Winchester Select Board meeting for February 2nd, 2022. It's a Wednesday. I'm Susan Verdicchio. I serve as chair, and I'm joined by my colleagues Mike Beckencourt, Mariano Goliboff, and Rich Mucci, and acting town manager Beth Rudolph. We're here to discuss the revised Civico proposal for the Waterfield lot. Very exciting. And we're going to be joined by a number of people. Want to be sure I introduce everybody. We're going to be joined by Megan Blackwell and Enzo Rascinato of the Finance Committee, Diab Jurius and Sally Dale of the Planning Board, John Servier and Marty Jones of the Housing Partnership Board. And we welcome the Civico team of Dave Tregorth, Andrew Consigli, Dan Hubbard, and Taylor Bearden. Since it's been, I'm leaving out Lynn Sweet. Also Lynn Sweet, who is the independent financial analyst, who will be talking about the comparison between the proposal that we presented at town meeting back in May and the revised proposal that has resulted from continued negotiations. But before we do that, since it's been several months, or it seems like several months, since we last talked about this, I just wanted to run through some of the background. And I'm going to try to find that on my machine. Here we go. So a number of months have gone by, but we last discussed this back in May. And there's a long history to this. The state law known as Chapter 40B was enacted to address the need in Massachusetts for more housing affordable to middle and lower income households in 1969. Our town's own data today shows that that need also exists within Winchester. We should note that 2 40B apartment projects are now under construction, a 96 unit building on Cambridge Street and a 147 unit project on River Street. But even with the addition of these buildings, Winchester's stock of affordable housing will be a bit under 5%, well below the 10% level required by Chapter 40B. Over the decades between 1969 and today, there have been opportunities for Winchester to permit developments of multifamily affordable properties. When school enrollments were falling in the 1980s, the town no longer needed 3 of its existing school buildings. One of those, the Noonan Elementary School on Hemingway Street, was converted to affordable housing, while the other 2 larger buildings on Highland and Church Street were sold for market rate residential condominium projects. There were also opportunities for multifamily developments at Winning Farm off of Thornbury Road, Wright Lock Farm on Ridge Street, and the farm acreage known as the Pansy Patch for a while, which is on Cambridge Street. The Winchester Planning Board began considering transit-oriented residential development as part of the town center revitalization project. Town Center Revitalization Project. I'm never going to write that into anything again. And multi-unit affordable housing was added to the town center zoning in 2015. In the spring of 2016, the town was notified of a proposed large 40B apartment project for 297 units. That was going to be off Forest Circle. And the following year, May of 2017, another 300-unit 40B was proposed on Holton Street. Both of these seem to be on hold, but not completely abandoned. Later that year, 2017, the Select Board, Planning Board, and Housing Partnership Board began working on a Chapter 40B housing production plan to guide the town into compliance with the law by encouraging a diversity of smaller and more affordable units located throughout the town. This plan was completed a year later, and it identified the Waterfield lot for transit-oriented mixed-use development that included affordable rental housing. Town meeting approved that use for the property in 2018. The Select Board then moved cautiously forward in the developer selection process for Waterfield with technical assistance from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership and planning consultant J.M. Bolton. The board first issued a request for qualifications, or RFQ, to gauge interest on the part of experienced qualified developers in such a project. The town received 9 submissions, and the board then developed a request for proposals, or RFP, for a redevelopment of the property to send to all the qualified developers. The town received 6 responses, which town staff scored according to the evaluation criteria within the RFP. And the state agency, Mass Housing, provided technical assistance to the town by reviewing and comparing the various proposals' financial aspects. The Planning Board and Housing Partnership Board reviewed the submissions and recommended the Civico proposal highly. And following a public interview of all the qualified proposals, the Select Board voted Civico as the winning proposal, with Penrose as its second choice. And that was in early October 2020. Town meeting approved moving forward with the Civico proposal by the required 2/3 vote in November. And a land disposition agreement was negotiated and approved again by 2/3 vote of town meeting in May of 2021. Townwide referendum on that town meeting action was called by a citizen's petition, and the vote was held on June 22nd. The result was 49% in favor, 51% against. The Select Board decided to reopen negotiations with Civico as the winning bidder to address the issues identified during the referendum debate, primarily the reduction in public parking on the property and insufficient financial return to the town. The board appointed a 5-member task force to advise on priorities for the board to consider during the renegotiation, and retained an independent financial consultant, Lynn Sweet of LDS Consulting, to assist. After meetings throughout the summer and early fall, the task force issued reports. 3 of the 5 members voted a recommendation to terminate negotiations with Civico, rewrite the RFP to place top priority on revenue, affordable housing, and public parking, and rebid the project. In further votes, the task force group's top 3 priorities were increasing the public parking, reconsidering the mix of affordable and market rate units, and increasing the town's financial return. So the board authorized acting town manager Beth Rudolph to re-begin discussions with the Civico team in October, and those have been going on since that time. So tonight the board has invited the Civico team to present its full modified proposal and answer questions from representatives of the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, and Housing Partnership Board, as I noted, and also any from the Select Board members. Financial Lynn Sweet will also provide her analysis after that. And then we anticipate the next steps in the coming weeks would be some further input to the Select Board from town boards and committees, with a discussion and vote by the board following very quickly thereafter. We're looking ahead to perhaps holding a public information session, potentially March 16th. And this is all looking towards a town meeting vote at a special town meeting in late April or May. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Civico team, Dave and Andrew, Dan, and Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. Good to be back in front of you speaking, and look forward to a good discussion about the changes that have been made, and really appreciate the process we've been through to make this the best project we can for Winchester and for the project, so that it'll be a success for the long term. Tonight I've got Dan Hubbard, who's been our number cruncher on the financial side, my business partner at Trecorth Companies, Andrew Consigli, Civico Development, designer, architect, and Taylor Bearden. Where are you, Taylor? There you are, with Civico as well, all around project manager. And we're all available for questions, and look forward to it. I'm going to share my screen real quickly. We wanted to keep this very short and sweet to get right to the heart of the matter, knowing that many of you have been focused on this for a long, long time, as Susan has recapped for us. So we didn't want to take too much time doing recap, but did just have these aerial shots for reference if we need them to come back to see what the current lay of the land is. And as you can see, the Waterfield lot, for some of those who may be just tuning in, is right here. The MBTA Winchester Center Station is right here. And this is the portion, the lot that we're talking about right behind D'Agostino's and next to the town center. This is just, if I can get my slides to work here. I think after 2 years, I could figure this out. There we go. And this is just the other direction. Here you can see the Chamber of Commerce building, which I'll talk about in a second, and the parking that's there. So the message that we got after the LDA and from the task force was that we really needed to drill down on two areas. First was parking, and second was just the financial return to the town. And so we really went to work with Select Board and Lynn Sweet to figure out how we could maximize both of those areas, among other things that we might be able to improve. And ultimately, I'm going to cut right to the chase. This was the original rendering that we provided in our proposal. And we looked at where we could possibly add parking. I'll go through sort of specific spaces and how many we're adding and deleting. But ultimately, the only place where we could add parking, because we couldn't go down another level because of the water table, was in this area, basically between the building and the new MBTA station. And that was really the only area that really worked, because we have already included 2 levels of parking underneath the building. And so ultimately, in order to make that happen and to get the circulation we needed, we essentially have removed the gatehouse, as we kind of called it, from the scope so that we could pick up some ground surface. And we also are proposing now to demolish the Chamber of Commerce building. That opens up this area, as you'll see in a minute. In order to pick up what is lost from the square footage, we've added a level here that previously was 3 stories and now it's 4 to match the rest of the building. And then we had to shift this facade forward about 10 feet, still obviously on our side of the property line. But we made those changes so that by deleting this rentable square footage, we weren't adding parking, but also harming the financial viability of the project and allowing us to get more funds to the town. So in terms of what that looks like on the ground, here's a very simple diagram. So currently what's on the ground right now is about 87 spaces. In our RFP response, we proposed 40 public spaces. And now we are proposing 70 public spaces. So that is the change, going from 40 to 70. How we do that, we reconfigured some of this ground floor because of the circulation changes that were made by bringing in traffic here at this point. We've added 22 spaces on the surface. You can see the new MBTA plans here and how those 22 spaces relate to that station. And we've also noted as well, and so basically residents and the public will come in off of Waterfield Road. If you're going into the garage, which is would be public spaces, these spaces, you would just take a right into the building. You would be able to circulate, come back out over here. And so you could really make a turn on the property in an area that's completely open to the public. If you're a resident of the building, you would come in the same way you would take a right into the garage, and then you would go down a ramp to a private deck that is below grade. So all of the public parking is up here. The private parking is down below. This is the private parking down here. And really increased, again, that public parking from 40 spaces to 70 spaces. In terms of what this may look like, I will say that we, have more work to do in terms of design and continuing this, but you can get a sense of what this feels like with the added floor here. We've got this facade scooched forward, and then we've got the parking right along between the building and the MBTA station. You've got one garage entrance here, you've got another garage entrance here, and you still have that private residential courtyard space that's up over the parking to give some amenity space to the residents and outdoor space. So in terms of the financials, we've got 4 columns here. Over to the far right, we did, just as a benchmark, have the other selected proposal just as a reference that was provided at the time of the request for proposals. Our original over here in this column was what we proposed at the request for proposals. The update was at the time of LDA, which was negotiated and went through town meeting. And then current is where we are today after the work that we've done over the past couple of months. So what you'll see essentially is a change in the purchase price from 1 million to 1.5 million. Total development costs have toggled around a little bit as we've deleted some square footage, added some square footage, made some other changes as well. The total number of units has not changed at 60 units. We did increase the number of units that are below 60% AMI by 8 units. That allowed us to maximize some of the tax credits that we're eligible to receive. You could see the change in the parking here as well, from 45 private spaces to 48 spaces, 40 public spaces, as we talked about, to 70 public spaces, and the total parking overall going from 85 to 118. Gross square footage, we've actually lost a little bit of square footage in these changes, and we have lost the retail component as well. We are also deleting, as I noted, the Chamber of Commerce building. And importantly as well, the cash flow share went from none at time of request for proposals, and no respondent provided cash flow sharing or refinance sharing, to now the town receiving 15% on cash flow and 25% on refinance or a capital event. So overall, what does that mean as we've worked with Lynn to sort of stretch these numbers out as far as we can? Means total to the town over 15 years is about $9.7 million. That's made up of a couple things. It's made up of acquisition. It's made up of the value of the parking spaces that we're handing back to the town for its use and for its benefit. It's made up of real estate taxes, the cash flow sharing, and the interest on the Affordable Housing Trust loan that will be used as a local matching grant. So ultimately, those are the changes that have occurred as a result of the financial adjustments we've been able to make, and as a result of the design adjustments that we've been able to make, and happy to talk through and answer any questions that you may have, and appreciate the opportunity to come and talk.
Thank you, Dave. I was going to throw it over to Lynn just to kind of walk through in maybe a little more detail what the changes were,
Mhm.
and then open it up for questions. I know it's a lot of information, but I think this seems like a logical time for Lynn to give her analysis.
Wonderful. Great to see everybody. Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting Group in Wellesley. I think that I'm going to bring up a memo that I worked on in looking at the presentation that was provided by the development team. The numbers do seem to continue to change. So there is some discrepancies, I think, between what they're showing today and what I might have looked at in the last week. This is a very complicated pro forma with a lot of numbers dependent on each other. And if you tweak one thing, there's definitely a ripple effect to the other items. So let's see if I can share my memo. So to be honest, I had not seen a revised building plan. I was not aware that there was going to be another level added to one of the buildings. That was new information for me. I don't know that it really, impacts the numbers greatly. It's sort of just moving things around a little bit. But that is why it's not noted anywhere in my documentation. So basically, I have put what I thought was the latest version of the chart that Civico just showed you. And one of the discrepancies is with regard to there apparently is there is an increase in the private parking spaces by 3, but this public parking space number now appears to have gone down to 70. So my total of 121 is 3 too heavy. Basically when we looked at numbers the first time, there was no share, there was no waterfall. My understanding, and if I'm wrong, that would be really a happy day here, is that the refi share has gone from 15% to 20% and not 25%. So I wanted to see what the intention on that was, and if that was meant to be 25%. So we can talk about that, I guess, afterwards. So what I did was I had wanted to try and compare the original proposal that was voted on at town meeting, but because it didn't have a waterfall in it, I wasn't really able to compare apples to apples. And the waterfall is really basically what happens if there's a year 15 event where there might be a refinance or a change in ownership. What I did was I took what seemed to be the discussion and the numbers that we had, which we sometimes referred to as the preferred proposal that was on the table at the end of the task force. And that was the reduction of reducing the 80% units to 60% to bring in more cash flow. And that was a result of the fact that there was some income in the original pro formas for parking that through the discussions did not appear that that was going to be recognized, so that by changing the affordability, more capital essentially was brought in, equity was brought into the project to cover the loss in income from the parking. So the first column here is my review of the numbers provided by Civico. And the two major differences, the one major difference is that with regard to the repayment of the Affordable Housing Trust loan, so the contemplation is that the Affordable Housing Trust will award $500,000 and that loan will be repaid with interest. So I've taken that out because essentially it's city money, town money that's being given and coming back. So I've left just the interest number there. The other is that the developer is due for the development of the parking garage a return in, I think, the first 12 or 13 years of a preferred cash flow. So I took that out of the cost for building the parking garage. So those are the two major differences there in both sets of numbers. And the only thing that's a little bit of an anomaly is that with the increase of the purchase price to $1.5 million, that additional $500,000 is also a preferred return repayment to the town of cash flow. And at the end of the day, there's only so much cash flow to go around. So if the developer is taking money out for the repayment of building the parking garage, and then the town is taking money out of cash flow for the $500,000, the amount left for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan to be repaid goes down because it's based on a percentage. So you'll see that the amount in the current proposal is actually less at refinance for a variety of reasons, but the main one is that not enough is the waterfall, the refinance numbers have changed because there's a little bit less income, because there's a little less money from the retail, but also there is less money that has been paid over time for that loan. So that really is kind of the crux of my analysis. I've actually separated out what we're referring to as the parking amenities. And so the first line item is the cost associated with producing the underbuilding parking. And the reason that the underbuilding parking needs to be built is for the residents and then for public parking. And so because that's actually a parking structure that would not have had to have been built if there was no need for public parking. The second item here is the exterior parking spaces that are going to be produced, the new 30 new spaces under this current proposal. And it's hard to put a dollar, amount to that. I think Civico's put in a value of 30,000 a space if it were, say, commuter parking, and they could recognize substantial revenue on the spaces. And I think that the town in the past, when we did a parking analysis as part of the task force review, the town essentially is giving its spaces away for the benefit of employees in the area and for consumers. So there's not going to be a recognizable income from those spaces. But that doesn't mean that they don't really have value. The value is, maybe it's not measured in dollars, but it does produce parking, which is a good thing for employers, and it's a very good thing for consumers. So that's why we kind of separated that out a little bit from the actual monetary piece of what is going to be recognized over years 1 through 15. I also added into my email, into my memo, just a little bit of, well, why did the numbers change? Some of it has to do with construction costs going down. On the one hand, you've got less building because of the retail. On the other hand, you've got demolition costs of the Chamber of Commerce building. There could be substantial costs to repair the sewer line if it's damaged in any way during construction. That has to be repaired. And previously, since that area was not going to be disturbed, it was not a cost in the pro forma. Some of the soft costs went down, meaning the non-construction costs went down because there is no funds being allocated, for example, to redesigning the Chamber of Commerce building or designing the retailer community space. And the developer fee went down because it's percent of the total development costs. Income, I think I mentioned earlier, went down because of the loss of the retail income. And again, if income goes down, management fee is percentage of income that goes down. There is a small reduction in real estate taxes as well. You're not getting real estate taxes for that commercial piece. And the year 15 refinance goes up because there is a larger percentage due to the town for that. And as previously mentioned, there's going to be an interest-free loan to the developer for the $500,000 for the purchase price. So I'm not sure if people understand the terms of that. Basically, it's a paper note so that at closing, Civica will sign a note to the town saying we owe you $500,000. And every year, I believe there's a payment of, if I think I'm correct, $40,000 until the loan is repaid. And that's a priority use of the cash flow before other people get paid. So it's not that the town is handing over a check for $500,000. It's that the developer is handing over a note and the town is due funds should those funds be available. We were asked last week by the Board of Selectmen as to whether we adding another story to the building could produce more affordable housing units, with the thought that, this is a kind of a one-time chance to be able to produce affordable housing in the downtown. And I think, as Dave mentioned earlier, when we changed the 80% units down to the 60% units, we are essentially maxing out the amount of tax credits that can come into the project, so that you would not gain any more affordable units by adding another story. You could gain some more market rate units, and there could be possibly more income from that to the town, but really not fulfilling more of the affordable housing goals. And now that I know there's already kind of a slice that's going up, it could create more issues around zoning and tax credit investors, the people that actually buy the credits, see more risk when there's more market rate units in a project, more than 50%, because they see that there's market risk. They know that someone is going to be able to fill one of those affordable units. They don't know necessarily with changes in the marketplace whether those market rate units are going to be filled. So that is my quick, very, very, very quick overview of where we were when the task force led off with the numbers and the negotiations to date that the Board of Selectmen and the town manager's office have been working on with Civica. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lynn. I know they're going to be, I just want to note, I know there are going to be more questions and comments from the public than we will possibly get to tonight, because we have a lot of ground still to cover. I just want to note that you can, if you're a resident and you're tuning in, you can put your question in the chat and we can save those, or your comment in the chat and we can save those and we'll read those. Or you can always send comments in to the town manager's office, and you can compile those, and we'll all certainly read them and try to get back to you with answers to your questions. Anyway,
excuse me, one correction: the chat is not on.
Oh, I forgot. Okay.
So what they're doing is sending all their questions to townmanager@winchester.us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. I wanted to try to take this in order and start with the Finance Committee with Megan and Enzo. But Dee, if I see your hand up, I will not forget you.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. I'll start. So first, thanks for sharing the materials and for inviting us tonight. The Finance Committee met last night after receiving the documents on Monday, and we've started our review. And so I have 4 questions to share and questions, comments, and I'm glad to hear there'll be another public forum at which we can ask more questions after we've done a more thorough review. So the first comment is that it would be valuable to have a scenario analysis for comparison. So for example, it's useful to compare the Civico proposal, the revised Civico proposal to different scenarios. For example, if nothing was done to the lot and it was left as is with its 40 parking spaces, or if the property were sold at market rate. So this is by no means suggesting that that's the action that the town should undertake, but it's a useful thought experiment. You know, it's useful balance financially to gauge the numbers. The second comment is that we were surprised not to see an analysis of the full 99-year term as proposed in the lease. I know there's a lot of variability and uncertainty. You could also say after 25 years there is as well. So it would just be useful at a minimum to project the current assumptions to the full term, so the town could clearly see what they would be getting after 99 years. The third comment is that members of the Finance Committee expressed skepticism at the value of an interest-free loan of the $500,000 in the current financial climate. And then lastly, it's more of a question. We question the difference in the financial return to the town as a function of percent AMI. So I know that's been changed in the proposal, and we can see there's a revenue difference to the developer, but it's not clear how it propagates back to the town. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dan Hubbard. Could I just ask back on that last question? I wasn't exactly clear on it. So are you talking about the change from some of the 80% AMI units becoming 60% AMI?
Exactly. What we're saying is, so how does that financially propagate back to the town?
So what has happened in that change is it works around in a few different ways. So it brings down our rental income a little bit. We can rent, for less money as they're more affordable units. As a result, the permanent loan that we can afford for the project comes down a little bit. But at the same time, the tax credit proceeds that we can bring in from the state to pay for those units goes up, mostly because the 9% low-income housing tax credit, which is the main component, is cut off at 60% AMI and less. So for 80% AMI and 100% AMI and higher, there are some funds available, but the bulk of the funds are really available for 60% AMI and less. So what we end up getting is a little less revenue and therefore a little less permanent loan on our permanent sources, but we get more low-income housing tax credit equity as a permanent source. And those two overall, made the project a little bit better financially and made up for some of the retail loss. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change much to cash flow, if that's the question, because really we're solving in the size of the loan that we can manage. We are borrowing the most possible with having the exact same debt service coverage ratio of about 1.2. And so we are borrowing as much as possible. So the cash flow number should stay about the same in all of the scenarios that we're looking at.
Yeah,
and that is partially a result of a requirement of DHCD in giving out tax credits is you really need to go out and maximize all your other sources and then come to them to ask to fill the gap. They don't want you having a project that is spitting off tons of cash flow and still asking them to pay for it, if that makes sense.
But I think that I agree with Dan's statement here. I think that what may have been lost here is that with the original set of numbers that I looked at, when we made all of the corrections on assumptions, the purchase price had gone down to 0. So by changing the unit mix, the $1 million purchase price became feasible because of the 2 million in equity coming in from those 8 units at $250,000 each. So one of the questions that you asked was about what the lot could be sold on the open market today. And it was my understanding that there had been an appraisal done at some point in the process. And I don't know if you're looking for something beyond that.
So that's a good start. If it were sold and say full market rate units were developed. So that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. And I know that's not considering the town's priorities for affordable housing, but it's just a bound for the financial perspective.
I think we looked at this under the existing zoning. There is a limit on the number of units that can be built. And so that I believe the reason the appraisal came in at the price that it came in at was if it was built as multifamily housing, the value is not that great because you're going to have to build the housing and the parking, and you're not going to end up with 120 units, for example. So we can certainly, look at that appraisal and trying to answer that. And I'm not trying to be, argumentative or disrespectful. The reason that we looked at the 15-year analysis is because that's how far we feel that we can go to be creditable in our analysis of the developer's numbers. And that was something that wasn't originally available to you when we first got involved in the project, to try and gauge what's going to happen after a year 15. It's dependent on public funds. It's dependent on interest rates. It's dependent on the reserves that are needed to fix the building. My concern about trying to project out further is that someone is going to look at this and say, how can you really do that? It doesn't make sense. So it's kind of the, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a scenario. So we felt by looking at this snapshot, we were at least giving you in the near term a realistic look at how the life of a project that has tax credits.
I would just chime in a little bit to that. I've never projected out 99 years or really ever more than 20 years on a project. And I really don't know any, company or anybody else that really does. Companies generally don't project out what they're going to make for the next 100 years because in 100 years, who knows what is going on. And 50 years, who knows what's going on. So I hear the request, but I'm very cautious about doing that because, like Lynn said, I could make it look like with a 3% growth rate consistently that this is going to make a ton of money, and with a 2% growth rate that it's going to go bankrupt or something like that. It can change dramatically depending on how you want it to look at the end of 99 years. And it's, you're not making terribly educated assumptions after 15 or 20 years into the future.
And just to follow on to that, can someone remind us why 99 years is the preferred term?
So my understanding, I think the preference from a developer's perspective is, a fee simple sale, and a lease was the preference of the town, so that there could be eventually it would go back to the town, and that there is a fair amount of control in the interim time period as the landlord for the site and can oversee everything. What 99 years really offers us is that any lender or tax credit investor looking at this considers a 99-year lease effectively equivalent to fee simple ownership, because their investment in 99 years will be easily repaid and taken care of. So when you get into shorter terms, you start getting a little more concerned about what that means in a back end analysis. And generally nobody goes over 99 years just because they don't get into the century mark, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, can we just get an answer? The number calculations that you provided in your refi had 20% to the town on the refi, which was different than what was in your chart. So do you have a sense of what, and obviously I wasn't present when the negotiations and discussions were taking place with the town manager's office. I just wanted to try and get some clarity on that as to whether the proceeds to the municipality are 20 or 25% at refinance.
Yeah. So right now I had put it in at 25%, but I looked back at what I sent you, Lynn, and in the what it says is 20%, and then I put in a 0.25 calculation for it.
No, so, you put in a 0.2. So
well,
if the goal is
in the latest. Yeah.
Okay, is the goal 0.25?
I think what we agreed to is 0.2, but I'm open to being corrected if that's not what we agreed to. But I think
maybe we can work that off. We'll work that out offline, and just so that everyone knows, the numbers that I presented were based on the 0.2.
Okay.
Okay.
So they could go up.
Okay. I don't want to pass up talking about the 99-year analysis and the thought process behind that. And I see that town council is here, Mina Macarius, and I neglected to introduce him, but I know he has some background to give on that.
Thank you, Susan. I was with the camera off, so you didn't see me probably because of that. So just to be clear, I don't have much more to add, Megan, than what Dan said, but to reiterate it, that was in the RFP from the beginning. And 99 years is sort of legal shorthand for everything but fee simple sale. It is essentially a disposition of property with the intent that unlike a regular disposition where once you sell the property, the owner has it with perhaps a limited restriction on it, a 99-year term is often used by public entities as a way to maintain some oversight and control in case a project doesn't get built or a project doesn't get built the way it's supposed to, get maintained the way it's supposed to maintain that degree of control, but effectively gives the ground tenant, and you'll often hear that as a distinction, almost all of the rights that the fee owner would have. So that is the reason why 99 years is used. It is not because of a preference for 99 over 80, for instance, or over 110. It's sort of, again, shorthand for everything but fee simple.
Thank you, Mina.
Can I make one point on that?
Enzo, yes.
If you don't mind. And if you don't mind, can I just share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I just wanted to go back to can you see that?
Yes.
The Waterfield Task Force, right? Mm-hmm. Recommendations, right? And I'm not sure if I'm sure given the results here, I think it seems like we did take these into account. I mean, just to bring people back to the task force was 5 people, and I think it was brought a cross section of folks from town, including people from the yes contingent and the no contingent. It was actually a task force that was designed to disagree, right? So there was and I was, I was the liaison on that committee. So disagree they did, and they went back and forth. There's a ton of discussion, but for all of these recommendations, they actually, I think all of these were unanimous except for one, which was 4-1. And I just want to make sure, because of that, I think these recommendations we really should pay really close attention to, because if we can get that group to agree, then they must be really important to all the various stakeholders in town. So I just went back and I compared our current proposal to what they recommended. And for the most part, we hit a lot of these, which I think is fantastic. I think we talked a little bit about increasing the size of the height to 60 feet and seeing if that could generate more revenue and or more affordable units. And I think sounds like we touched upon that, but we didn't really do a complete analysis. And then I guess we're talking about the 99-year lease and it being standard, but I think one of the things that the task force asked for, and there are definitely a lot of other examples of lease terms that are less than 99 years for, and I think the chief reason behind that is because, as Dan said earlier, who knows what's going to happen in 99 years. So having a shorter lease term, certainly reduces risk to the project. So, and then the other one was around sustainability. I don't know if we've gotten that far to know if we've put any language in there, but I just wanted to highlight those three.
That's a good point. And I was going to ask about sustainability if it didn't come up this evening. That was one of the things I had jotted down.
If you don't mind, could I just follow up on one of the statements about what would happen if the lot was to have 40 parking spaces on it? Because I do believe that the task force analyzed this. In fact, I think the planning office did a lot of research into the revenue for the parking spaces. And it's my understanding that it's something like $10 a year for a employee to rent the spaces, and that the revenue is basically non-existent to meet the intention of what the community wants for that lot. So I'm not sure that we can certainly put that into an analysis, but that was one of the things that we discovered when we were looking at the initial set of numbers, was that the revenue projection on the parking was well below what based on the desire to not charge anything for those spaces. So I throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, that was something that sort of emerged during the task force discussions as well. And I mean, the revenue was kind of based on if you had if you assumed someone was paying, let's say, Boston prices or commuter prices in a commuter lot, and the town's goal is to have public parking that's available during the day for consumers or customers, or for people who have offices in town, or the owners of those retail establishments, to be able to park, not to necessarily maximize town revenue or any revenue from those spots. But I think we instituted charging for the parking to kind of manage it so that it would stay open for people, that there would be turnover during the day. So that is a valid point. And then if you aren't really collecting that revenue, how can you value the spaces, kind of hypothetically? So that's also a good point about the 99-year term, and we'll have to talk with Civico and understand why that kind of fell to the bottom of the list of things to analyze.
Susan, to be clear, I don't want to go too far down the road here, but the 99-year term is one of the things that is in the RFP that went out. So this is I don't think it's a choice Civico made. It's a choice the town made with the RFP long ago. So if it were to be an interest of the town, there may be ways to divide it up with option periods that equal 99 years, but the bids were sent in based on a 99-year term. That was a fundamental part of the RFP, and I think I've just want to say that because I was asked in response to that question with the task force
Yeah,
a couple of times. So don't want to hide the ball there on that.
that's a good point. Okay. Okay. So I have the sense that Finance Committee has asked what they want to right now. And so I'd like to go on to the Planning Board. And I think Diab
Good
had
evening,
his
everyone.
hand raised. Oh, there you go.
So the first question I have is, what is the actual change in public spaces? Where are we at now, and what will we get?
So essentially, we have, let me pull this back up. What we're proposing essentially, and we've thought about this because we still think that having public sort of space available for a farmer's market, an art fair, etc., in this high traffic location is really appealing. And certainly what we heard about the appealing part of the previous iteration of this. We've essentially created 2 entrances so that this could, the town will control this area completely. And so that this could be cordoned off at certain days, certain hours, certain times, and really transitioned over to, a farmer's market or something other else, right? That could happen in this area while people could still park, the public could still park within here.
Right. I just actually, I had a very simple question, which is, what is the total number of public spaces there now? So that
87.
I understand.
87.
87. So this is essentially, we're going from 87 to a total of 70.
Correct.
And one of the questions that's been asked is, what is the value of the parking? One of the things that I would like to know is, how much would it cost for the town to bring the existing parking up to the same condition that Civico would? I think there's a capital investment in the parking. It's not just the value of how much the town would get if they were to charge for those spaces. It's also the cost to the town if they were to actually upgrade those spaces. So
Right.
I think that's a useful thing to look at.
And I believe, Lynn,
Yeah,
you guys looked at that, correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I just saw it. I believe in Ms. Sweet's sheet.
Mhm.
She took it down to 0 because there was no revenue. So the value of the parking was an intangible rather than something tangible. So I'm just wondering if there's another way of looking at value. It might just be, how much money would the town have to pay if they were to actually bring it up to spec? So that was just no need for a reply right now. So in the redesign, it looks like you've lost the community gardens, which were on, I guess, the gatehouse. Are those still lost? Will they be gone forever?
I think we had some opportunity to do it in the common courtyard. That's the building is surrounding. But yeah, there wouldn't be, they wouldn't be up in that location, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that the task force did not rank the amenities to the residents as part of their concerns. I think that was that was a loss. I think that the community gardens was a unique part of this plan. And I think that we should also be looking at what it's like to be a resident in this building. The other thing I wanted to note is that if you do put another story on this building, regardless of the financials, you will run into significant pushback by the neighbors. We've already heard that going to 60 feet on previous plans that Dennis Carlone produced for this lot. We had significant pushback. People don't want to see a building this high. I think that putting 4 stories directly on Waterfield, I think that's going to be a challenge because it does not come down and meet the existing street front very well. So I also really want to note that people keep talking about putting marketplace units on there, but nobody seems to be looking at the finances of that, in the sense that if you put a single child in one of those bedrooms, you have already blown your net positive income to the town. I think that when you're looking at simply tax revenue based on not knowing who's going to be in those units, you are not doing your due diligence. This town depends upon households without children to support the households with children. And so when you start talking about putting market rate units just as a means of achieving tax positive units, you're not going to get them. And I think that any sort of scenarios where you start adding more units, you better look at the actual net revenue to the town. I haven't seen that in any of the projections from the task force. Maybe I missed it. I am concerned about that. I mean, to be honest, I'm sad. I'm sad because I saw a vision from the Civico plan, which connected it to the life of town center. And one of the things that the planning board looked on with a lot of enthusiasm was the programming that that plaza provided. One of the things we disliked about the other proposals was the expanse of asphalt. And I think that we're losing an opportunity to provide a very dynamic environment off of town center. So thank you.
Are you looking for a fiscal impact analysis?
I don't know how far, I will leave that up to the select board. I don't know how many units would be added by an extra story.
I think my question is,
Yeah.
there hasn't been a fiscal impact analysis done on the project to date. We have been looking at it from an overall deal structure. Oftentimes when someone does go for a special permit, they do provide a fiscal impact analysis that's peer reviewed, and it looks at items such as additional costs for fire and police, and cost to the school systems, as well as revenue from real estate taxes and excise taxes and one-time fees. That is what a fiscal impact analysis does. And it would be something that could be generated by the developer and peer reviewed. It sounded to me that that's what you're looking for, but so I just want a little bit of clarity.
I would welcome that. Again, it's up to the select board to direct that. I am leery of, I think that because this is an affordable housing, and it is, I think, expressly, the impact on the schools is not part of the decision. So I don't know that. My concern is that people are equating market rate units with income to the town. And if I were to look at any development in town, I would have to ask, will this actually be revenue positive or revenue negative? And so I think it is, when I hear people say it was put an extra story on because it'll give the town more money, I think that analysis, I don't think that's a really thorough analysis, because I think there's more behind it. I would welcome some sort of analysis on the other things that you mentioned, but that's up to the board. Thank you.
So, one thing that I would mention from a fiscal analysis standpoint is that as long as it's affordable housing, the reality is affordable housing will be built somewhere, right? Whether it is built here, or if it's not, it will be a hostile 40B built somewhere else. Those units will be built. So I don't think that building the affordable units here, have an additional fiscal burden to the town, because those units will be built somewhere in town. The question is whether the town, we control where they're built, and we decide to build them near transit, so that the people who live there have a better quality of life so that we reduce the impact of traffic to the town, or whether we allow developers to build it wherever they want, which is going to be further away from transit. So it will make our traffic and parking much worse. But the idea of a fiscal analysis, like saying, well, what's the cost to the schools based on the kids that will live in affordable housing? Well, that will be the same. We're under 10%. The units will be built. But, you know, like Diab said, if they are market rate, then yes, they have a fiscal impact because those are units that wouldn't be built otherwise since we control the land. So I'm not sure that it makes sense to do a fiscal analysis on affordable housing because, I mean, the net is zero because those units will be built somewhere else or there. So I'm not sure that there is an impact as long as the units are affordable. If the units are market rate, then yes, of course, they would have an impact since it is land that we own, and that would be a decision that we would, you know, that the town would make.
I just wonder if someone from Civico or Lynn Sweet or the town could comment, because I didn't know about it for a while, and I'm not sure the people on this meeting know about it, but the letter from the MBTA that came in August to the town that I know the task force did not see, about concerns they had with the original design. So I didn't know if someone could educate this group on that letter and how Civico has dealt with that and what the concerns were from the MBTA on the original design.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So we met with several times with the MBTA in preparation as we move forward with this. We also met with the MWRA regarding the sewer line underneath, and got far enough where the MBTA did write a letter to us, which we thought was, which it, you know, we've done multiple projects up against commuter rail lines in other parts of Metro Boston. And generally their comments were they didn't like the gatehouse. They thought that it was too close and potentially blocked access to their signal equipment, which is further down to the left of the page. And that was the major issue. I would say kind of all the other things kind of came from that. So they certainly would prefer something that looks like this. I will say, that being said, MBTA's comments always out of the gate are the most conservative, most pushed back version of their reality that they could imagine. I mean, you know, somewhat a little cavalier, but in response, you know, it's, you go to downtown Boston and is there a 40-foot setback around every MBTA station in the city of Boston? And the answer is no, right? And essentially that's what they wish were the case and they would like to see here. And this is certainly closer to that. And that essentially was their comment, that they would like unfettered access all the way back across the property. They would like, they you know, they didn't want to have any obstruction, you know, to go under anything, to go around anything. so I don't, Beth, I don't know if you have anything to add, any comments from the MBTA that I forgot, but that's essentially.
No, I think that's a fair assessment of all of it. Yeah.
And I mean, I think from the town's perspective, you know, they, you know, I don't know that you want to give into the MBTA on everything, you know, whether it's us or anybody, to be honest. I mean, they would like 50 feet of your property all the way across, as Beth will tell you, if they could get it. So I think there was some pushback that we could make, but there's no doubt about it. They will prefer this version.
And I certainly think in my experience, if the town and the developer are in agreement about, you know, the issues in the town and, you know, the developer go in together to the MBTA and have a reasoned approach, I think, you know, there's a great shot at getting them to be more reasonable than their first shot across the bow in a, you know, a letter.
before, I was going to say, before the conversation moves any further, I just in the interest of clarity, I think the discussion thus far about adding a story, you know, the proposal from Civico is adding the story to the street front, but that's not adding units. It's, as I understand it. Yeah, Dave, could you just fill us in? That's why that was shown on this plan.
Sure. Just to be clear, we are not increasing the overall height of the building, the maximum height that we previously had proposed. Can folks see my screen?
I can. It's the parking right now, though.
There we go. Okay. So everything that's not colored is remaining the same. So the main portion of the building really has no change to it whatsoever. What we did previously was we stepped this down to a 3-story presentation to come over and roughly match the height of the neighboring building. But because we've eliminated this square footage, but also have the financial pressure of returning more to the town, we couldn't lose units, right? So we had to add it back somewhere. And we've added it here, going from 3 stories essentially to 4 stories and matching the rest of the building, and then sliding this facade forward about 10 feet, so that we could still, we've lost a little bit of square footage, but we have the same number of units, even though we're eliminating this. So hopefully that makes sense.
And I will say to the question of adding a story completely, you know, we did think internally about putting a 5th floor on here because we were asked to. And for many of the reasons we discussed and were discussed, we don't like that idea and don't want to go down that path. You know, from both a limitation on how much affordable housing we can build, additionally, and still have that be more profitable to the town. But, you know, very largely about design, what this looks like, and we still have to go through a permitting process after we get through an LDA, if we get through an LDA. And we think, you know, this height when we got selected was one thing that stood out against, I think, Penrose and Wynn, who I believe both proposed a 5-story building.
Is it possible to tell us more in numbers why that seems like a bad approach to you? I mean, I think we all understand the, you know, the permitting and design aspects, but does it make it, it seems hard to understand why adding units would make it less financially feasible, and if it would.
Yeah. So I think the important caveat is whether we're adding more market rate units or more affordable units. So in affordable housing, just because of the way the funding programs are set up, you're generally maximizing how much funding you can bring in per unit into the project at around 40 affordable units, which is what we, you know, worked with Lynn and changed our plan from 32 units below 60% AMI to 40. So if we were to go up and make those all affordable or 2/3 of those affordable, that is achievable, but at a cost to the project. And so our acquisition price would have to come down to make up for the fact that we're not getting as much subsidy per unit from the state for those marginal units as we did for the first 40. Basically, we're not able to get all the money we need to pay for those marginal units because we're not able to get more tax credits. And the other side of it is, you know, if these 20 units per floor, if we add 20 units, we also need to take parking back to those units in some extent. So we have about, I think, a 0.75 ratio of parking for our housing. So we'd want to take back 15 of the parking spaces that we were planning on making public spaces and making those private spaces. If it were all market rate and you built a bunch of big fancy market rate housing, it could possibly add on. You'd still have that parking issue, probably a bigger parking issue because they're more dependent on more parking. And I think Lynn touched on how it does affect our tax credit investors and how eager they are to look at a project that is more dependent on market rate rents, which fluctuate a heck of a lot more than affordable rents. But that was part of the financial, and that was the financial side of this. And honestly, a bigger side of this was perhaps the permitting design side of this. And both of them kind of pointed us to we don't think this is the right direction to go.
I'll just add one thing to that. I think, from a design perspective, we'd probably, and from a permitting perspective, to even make it viable, we'd want to set it back so we'd lose some units as we set it back. And then anytime you have an articulation in the facade where structurally that exterior wall moves in or out, the cost of construction just goes straight north. So it's not like you just, take your same construction costs and add it. We think, that there's, it'll be much more expensive to add that fifth floor, especially when we consider the fact that we probably will have to set it off to even have a chance in a permitting scenario. So.
And just to add on the affordability, the reason that there are caps on subsidies is just because they're scarce resources. So the state and federal government wants to spread those resources over as many projects as possible.
I know this is very important to Mike, so Mike Betancourt has his hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Dan and Lynn and Dave. For me, I look at it kind of how Enzo had put it up on the screen earlier. We've got kind of a objective from the task force to kind of analyze these things. So, I know you guys know the financial impact of putting on a floor, or even if it's stepped back, even if you're putting 8 units up and we get 8 market rate and there's 2 affordable up there, that might be worth it for us. Might be worth it for the trust to put in more money to get more units. The town has limited funds for affordable housing, so we need to look at every option to leverage what we have. So if it's stepping back something on the roof, it's a decision that we have to have in front of us, I think, completely, even if the numbers are a little loose, to be honest with you. I'm not looking for a 99-year lease study, that we've been talking about. I'm looking for just quick and dirty the impact. We know that there are limited funds, from the state, and so it's just something for us to consider. So when we go to town meeting, we can just put the slides up on the screen saying, you asked us to do this, we did this, here's why we recommend this. This is a great project. The higher level of affordability of these units is a phenomenal gain for where we started. It is we've been trying to get blood out of the stone for the past 6 months on this project, and it's really come a long way, and I appreciate the work that you guys have put into it. And the design has changed a little bit, but the Penrose project looks similar. That was our backup. The planning board ended up really liking that one towards the end, and it was kind of back and forth. So we lose the gatehouse building, but I think we kind of get a little bit closer to what people have been asking us for, and so we can at least say we're being responsive to the questions. So that's what's important to me, is that we're being responsive to what's being asked, and that's essentially our job. I think the project looks great. I don't think there's frankly an opportunity for us to go out and get anything better than this. I mean, this is really like we're designing this, every piece of this along the way with Civico. So we appreciate your partnership and hope we can, move this forward quickly. So thank you.
So does the planning board have anything further? Sally, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Thank you for asking. No, I only have understood maybe about 40% of the conversation. But I do agree, this is about the numbers part, because I haven't had the time to dive into them and into the whole structure of affordable housing finance. But I do agree from a community life point of view that it is a loss to the town to lose the community space that was a really big selling point, at least for me personally, to the original design. So it challenges me to understand the reasons, notwithstanding the MBTA wanting to have clear access to their switches. But it challenges me to understand the reasons for getting rid of the gatehouse, getting rid of the retail, getting rid of the community space, not considering the renovation of the chamber building, because it did seem to me that there was the possibility of there being really interesting community uses. And so, I mean, I would understand that if I understood the other 60% of the conversation that I don't. But if somebody could say it again in a simple way, why it is that it's better for the town and in this, let's say, 15-year window to remove those amenities, it's definitely better for the world to bring the numbers down to 60%, more units at 60%. But why is it better for the town to remove those amenities and add a floor to the building when the floor itself is not going to generate any more investment capital? It's just going to generate rental income, right? And it's going to be the same number of affordable units. I guess I just don't quite understand the financial rationale, and it's not because it hasn't been well explained. It's because I haven't well understood it.
Sally, I'll try.
It is complicated financially, and go ahead, Dave. I mean, yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, apologies, Sally. Thank you for the question. I think sometimes we can get in the weeds. Ultimately, if you look at the comparison between our original at the bottom where it says total to the town $7.1 million and the current total to the town $9.7 million.
Over 15 years. That's a 15-year number.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the gain financially. And then there's the gain in terms of parking and those 30 spaces, I believe.
Right.
So those are the two things that you're getting in exchange. That's the trade-off.
Okay.
So I would now open it up for the Housing Partnership Board. Any questions from John or from Marty?
I'm conscious of the time. Marty,
yes.
Do you have questions? You want to go first?
You're on mute, Marty.
I think you're on mute, yeah.
I don't really have questions. I think the Civico team in the town has done a great job at trying to thread this needle. I too am disappointed because I loved the gatehouse and I loved the interior space. But we heard loud and clear that parking downtown is important to, residents of the town. And I think Dave just made it pretty clear. The trade-off is to get the parking because nobody can afford to go down or to add a bigger garage or that stuff that is really, really expensive. The only way to do it is to take that surface area and make parking. I love the idea that it's designed in a way that you could in fact close it off and still have something happen there. And when we get into details of design and pavement and how it all works and the landscape details, I'm sure we'll think of some interesting ways to make it, an enlivening space in times when it's not needed for commuter parking or other parking downtown. So, in the beginning, we picked Civico because they had the highest percentage of affordable housing. They had the most compact building that fit into downtown. They actually had the most public parking in the beginning, and those things are all still true. So, I know there's a lot of detail we'll have to work out when you get into the permit process, but that needs to be later down the road. We kind of get past this threshold question of, at a high level, do we have a deal that works for the town? So I think it's great that you've been able to squeeze a little more money to the town out of this. And I know it pushes off the Affordable Housing Trust loan repayment, but I'm confident that'll happen over time. So we'll just have to wait a little longer to get the money back. So I think, I don't think I have questions other than sort of, I'd love to answer anybody's questions about affordable housing finance. If you want to, Sally or anybody else, have a little 101 somewhere, I'm happy to dig into numbers and try to explain some of the, what can be kind of mumbo jumbo, but.
I'll take you up on that, Marty.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you.
I have actually just two questions that are almost more factual on concerning the parking. My understanding is that there are three groups of people currently parking on the existing Waterfield lot. These are MBTA commuters, business owners and their employees, and the public. Who is going to be able to park on this new parking after assuming this building gets built? Is it going to be used reserved for business owners and their employees? How much of it will be used for public parking? And the second question is any consideration being given to increasing the parking fees so that in fact, parking is valuable space, and is there an opportunity to increase the revenue to the town by not just charging a token permit fee?
So that's more of a question for the town, I guess.
I mean, it's a general question, for the town. I mean, for everyone, but
yeah.
Susan, I can help on the second part of that question. So you're right. Right now we sell permits for commuters. It's either $125 a quarter or $500 for the year, and that's just for Winchester residents. You have to be a Winchester resident to purchase the commuter permit. For town center employees, the permits are $10 a year, and so that decision was made several years ago when we were really trying to push the town center employees kind of out of the on-street parking spaces and into the lots. So the decision was made to take that financial, make that financial decision to reduce the fee of those permits to encourage people to not park in the on-street parking. And I think that has been a very successful decision that we've made, and it really has opened up those on-street spaces to customers downtown. But as we look at, where this goes long term, I think, we're looking at the T being under renovation for the next 2 to 2.5 years. And so we have kind of a time here where we have to really make some decisions about how we want to manage parking downtown for commuters and employees and other people.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sentiment from the task force was, everything we heard was that they did not want these spaces used for commuters. They wanted them used for employees and for consumers. And that's why the value is low at the moment.
That's fair. Yeah.
Susan, can I?
Yes, go
make
ahead.
a comment
Maureen.
here?
Mhm.
And I'll share my screen just very quickly. So I flew a drone over the town center and counted the spaces, both empty and taken. And essentially on weekends, we have about 65% of all parking spaces are open. And on weekdays, we have about 38% of all parking spaces are open at any time. So the reality is, when we have over 300 parking spaces that are empty, and this is at peak utilization, over 300 parking spaces are open in the town center, it's going to be very hard for the town to really charge a lot of money for parking spaces when somebody can just go somewhere else, because 1 out of every 3 parking spaces at the peak usage, 1 out of every 3 parking spaces is empty in the town center. So that's for the select board to decide how to allocate the parking spaces. That's not up to Civico. Whether it is there, whether it's on any other parking spot, it's going to be up to the select board. But John, it's a good question. It's going to be very hard for us to monetize it, given how much parking there already is that is always empty.
Thanks, Mariano. Diab, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief comment that this is essentially government subsidies if we're giving away free parking. And so when we're looking at the balance sheet, so when we put parking on the streets, the town is paying for that. When we put parking on parking lots, the town is also paying for that. Giving that away is essentially a government subsidy for private use. And I know that the town has been looking at how the government is spending its money and whether this is the best use of that. So I think that the government, the town, should be recouping some return on those lots. Again, this is a select board policy issue, but you know, we go through a number of discussions as to where the town's priorities are. And we've certainly gone through 6+ months of revision on this project in order to raise revenue for the town. And this is one where the town is essentially saying, we will pay for parking. And I think that that has to be a part of the conversation. Is that what the town wants to do?
Okay.
So thank you.
Yep, thank you. So I wanted to be sure that Rich and I mean, we're hearing from the select board at this point. So why don't we just switch into that that phase? And Rich, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. So do you have anything?
I want to thank Civico and the team for being here tonight, and all the members for joining us. This is something that, you know, certainly the select board's been living for many weeks now, since the referendum vote in June, and we've been working towards this goal. You know, this is a project that I fully support. I think we've made changes that certainly address the public's concern that we've heard, has addressed the task force's list of concerns. I think, you know, we've done the best we could, working in the parameters that we could to deliver this project. You know, I understand, you know, people might not think this is a perfect project and you're giving up things, you know, and things that possibly could be replaced in other areas of town. You know, you think about this public space that we're turning into parking for the time being, but again, you know, none of us have a crystal ball for the next 100 years for this town. Right now, looking at the town, I think parking is what our residents, you know, said loud and clear that they would miss from this area of town. So certainly we're addressing that. You know, 20, 30 years from now, if mass transit, you know, becomes, you know, a steady, reliable resource and the car goes away, then maybe, you know, certainly this area could be looked at as, you know, something different. But I think, you know, the goals that, you know, some members have mentioned can be accomplished in other areas of town. You know, specifically, you know, the Aberjona initiative has talked about putting an amphitheater in the back of the library space, which would be, you know, a great idea. You know, I think from a planning standpoint, we have all these developments that are coming into town, which is going to increase, you know, the number of residents and guests that will be downtown. So with a new train station, schools that are certainly, you know, bulging at the seams and ever growing, and new development, I certainly think there needs to be a plan for infrastructure such as parking that really hasn't existed. So I think being able to keep this parking lot intact, get our affordable housing, get revenue for the town is certainly a win for the town. And I commend Civico for working with us to come to this point. And certainly I hope all the boards can find a way that maybe this isn't a perfect project, but certainly something that they can get behind and deliver for the residents of Winchester.
Thank you, Rich. Mariano, did you have anything further?
Yeah, no, I support this project, and I appreciate Civico coming back to the table and making these revisions to address the issues. I think I made it clear that I don't think additional parking is necessary. I think there's plenty of parking, but the voters spoke, and the voters and the task force said we needed more parking. So I'm happy that we have a proposal that addresses that, and I agree with Rich that I support this project 100%. I think bringing residents to the town center will help our businesses by having 60 families within walking distance of the town center businesses, that they're able to walk to the train station for commuting. I think this is a great project, and I hope that all boards are able to support it. And as Rich said, we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a great project, and I hope that everybody will support it.
Mike, did you have anything further? I actually don't even see Mike anymore, but he's... all right, with that said, I too want to thank Civico and Lynn for all this further work on this. I think you've done a great job. It's certainly a really attractive building. I was concerned that the layout of the living areas would change in order to accommodate this, and that didn't happen. I'm happy to see that. It still has a courtyard. Happy to see some trees. That was one of my questions. You know, we were talking about all the parking. I would hate for people living in this apartment house to look out at a train station and just an empty parking lot. Please, we need some street trees or some landscaping for that, just because it's where people are living, and that's an important issue for just a quality of life. I did want to ask, just to confirm the thinking along about the sustainability features, about the passive house design and all electric building. If you could kind of confirm that we're not losing any of that, I hope.
No, and I think by the time, hopefully, if we get around to building this, we'll be even better at it. We're building two passive houses right now, all electric, solar on the roof, use 95% less energy than conventional construction, and we'll be taking those lessons learned and applying them to the next project.
Okay.
Yep, all still there.
Okay, good to hear.
Susan, just
Yes.
one other thing, if I could.
Yeah.
I know there are some members of the task force listening tonight. I know some members couldn't be here given their schedules. I know some sent a letter to the town manager's office today, just stating their opinion that some of them feel that an RFP is warranted. Certainly, I appreciate their opinion. I certainly appreciate all the hard work they put into this project and creating that list. As Enzo, I think, said it beautifully. That task force was designed to disagree, and disagree they did. But ultimately, they did come up with a list, and that list was the catalyst that we went back and looked at this project. And certainly, gave Civico feedback of where the town was at, and I think they played a vital role in that. And certainly, I respect their position that they think a new RFP should be issued. But I think being one of the four gatekeepers of this project, I certainly think we should advance it for the town to look at and let town meeting decide on that. So, and again, I support the project.
Okay, thanks. So I know the hour grows late, but I did want to allow 5 minutes or so for public comment. Thank you all for staying. If you have to go, this is mainly for the the select board's benefit to hear from the public.
Susan, do you want me to read the letter that they sent into the record?
I was going to say, and we should definitely do that. And so if people are here who would like to speak, you know, we do want to limit it to about 5 minutes. So if you want to speak, just if you could try to be brief. And also I tend to forget to mention, but I should ask you to mention your, you know, your address for the record. And it's, you know, it's just simply an opportunity to be heard. I don't know that we'll be able to answer you or respond back. But first of all, I would call on Beth to go ahead and read into the record that letter that we got from the 3 members of the task force, please.
Sure, thanks. So I received this letter via email from Pat Fortin this morning. Members of the task force received the same kind of packet of information that went to the members of the finance committee and the housing partnership board and the planning board, as well as the select board ahead of this meeting. So this is verbatim from his email. Dear select board members, we are responding to the select board's decision to continue to move forward with the Civico proposal. Thank you for permitting our letter to be read into the public record. The 3 of us were excited and honored to be asked to serve on the Waterfield Task Force. The town-wide majority no vote that rejected the original proposal from Civico with regards to the Waterfield project created an opportunity for the town to address and review the wide variety of concerns the public had with the process and details related to the project. The committee members had very different views, backgrounds, and concerns regarding the project. Our committee made an extensive effort to provide constructive recommendations to the town. Ultimately, the committee was able to come together and provide the town with very detailed and specific recommendations to improve the project. It was also important that it addressed the concerns of Winchester residents of parking and revenue, but also that there was a transparent and open review of the project and process. Ultimately, the primary recommendation from the Waterfield Task Force was to terminate negotiations with Civico and reissue the RFP. Additionally, there was a long list of approved motions, most unanimously to alter the current RFP to address town residents and committee members' concerns. The task force had many ideas and much discussion on ways to make a new RFP more flexible so developers could be more creative with their proposals. It was also a priority of the committee that increased parking and increased town revenue be primary components of the new RFP. We thank the select board for their effort with Civico to improve the original proposal. We can imagine that it took serious effort to get any changes from Civico. But what is very clear from the new Civico proposal is that the town should not accept this proposal. We sincerely doubt that this is the best proposal the town can achieve. The fact that the new Civico proposal has slightly improved the parking and revenue issues is a strong indication that if allowed to go out to bid, there's a very good chance this deal could get even better for the town. At minimum, it would address the public's concern that the process is fair and that the final deal was gained through methods that involve bidding in a free and open market rather than negotiations with one outfit. The Waterfield lot is a prime piece of town-owned real estate, and the town gets one chance to get this proposal right and in line with the residents' priorities. The town will never know what the best proposal could be without reissuing the RFP with the committee's recommendations. We respectfully request that the select board follow the recommendations of the Waterfield Task Force and reissue the RFP, including the recommendations of the committee. We do not agree with presenting the current Civico proposal to town meeting for approval. Sincerely, Bill Cummings, Paul Manganaro, Patrick Fortin, Waterfield Task Force members. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I see one hand raised from Stephanie Zaremba.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, Steph. I think you're free to speak if you are. You might have to unmute yourself. Okay.
I'm here. Thank you, Susan. Stephanie Zaremba. I live at 38 Park Ave. I've been listening from my phone, so I am not going to be on video. I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
I want to start by saying that few things are as frustrating as feeling misrepresented, and I want to be very clear that the letter that was just read represented recommendations of the task force that were far from unanimous. I was one of 5 members. The task force was designed to disagree, for sure. It was a pretty clear 3-2 split on an issue that at the townwide vote was almost completely 50-50. So that I hope, and I think I've heard from the select board that that's been taken into account, but I want to underscore that. I do not think an RFP should be reissued. I've said that all along. I think it's a red herring for pure obstructionism at this point. And the reason I say that is the proposal we just discussed tonight, or we heard about, is almost a perfect, if not completely perfect, compromise. The town was deeply divided on this issue. I represented one extreme of that divide. I liked the original proposal as is and wanted to see it go forward. There are many things about this revised proposal that I don't like, but it's a compromise. No one leaves feeling like they get what they want. We all get close enough. And so congratulations to the negotiating team. This is an excellently negotiated deal, and it's a very great compromise that addresses every concern that we heard voiced. It's time to move on and do this. We need the affordable housing that comes up at town meeting twice every year. And again, anyone who continues to say no at this point, I think is revealing that their goal all along has been nothing more than complete obstruction of affordable housing at Waterfield. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Is there anyone else for a public comment? I'm going to say I'm seeing none, and I'll close that period. Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us so late. Many thanks to Civico and to Lynn and Beth. And
I move that we adjourn.
I think that we're pretty much done. So yes, thank you all. Go ahead. So I need a second, please.
Second.
And we have to do a roll call vote. Rich?
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
Mike?
It's not here.
I believe Mike left the meeting. Mike left the meeting. Sorry. I vote yes as well. Thank you all, and we're adjourned.
Thanks,
Thanks
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you.